March 12, 2018, 2:46 a.m. Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, Atlanta. The busiest airport in the United States has gone dark. A cascading grid failure has silenced the runways and blinded the cameras. Emergency lights flicker along empty concourses. Outside, grounded jets glint under sodium lamps. And deep beneath Cargo Bay 17, a man in a gray janitor's uniform pushes a cart toward a restricted door that should be sealed. His name is Owen Talbot. By 3:18 a.m., an armored vault containing $18 million in freshly printed U.S. currency, bound for an overseas flight, is gone. Talbot's badge is found on the floor. His locker is empty. His phone is smashed. He has no ticket, no passport, no trace. A man who cleaned floors for a decade just vanished with more money than most banks hold overnight. Before we dive into the unbelievable story of a night shift janitor at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport who triggered a brief power outage, walked a sealed container holding $18 million straight out of a secure vault, loaded it onto a garbage truck, and vanished without leaving a single trace. Smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Comment below where you're watching from, and tell me, would you have noticed the invisible man cleaning floors while he was stealing a fortune? Hours before the blackout, a man clocks in for the night shift at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. His name is Owen Talbot, 43, no record. For 10 years, he has pushed a mop through the same corridors and tunnels, swiping the same badge past the same beeps, speaking little, watching everything. Talbot was hired on October 5, 2009 by Monarch Facility Services, a contractor on the North Cargo Complex. His route, Concourse T restrooms, Service Tunnel 4, then Bay 1517. He lived alone in a one-bedroom on Riverdale Road. Rent was paid in cash on the first of each month. Co-workers called him polite and quiet. A thermos of black coffee, paperbacks in his locker. Supervisors logged him as reliable. He did not take sick days. On cameras, he moved like background. In 2016, Monarch cut hours and froze benefits. The pension match ended on July 31st. Night workers lost overtime differentials. Talbot's take-home dropped below $500 a week. He did not complain, but his behavior changed. He stayed late off the clock for deep clean, lingering in back corridors after patrols passed. He switched to a later MARTA bus and walked the last mile along Sullivan Road. Alone. The airport had grown around him like a machine. Between 2014 and 2017, international cash flights transited weekly through the North Cargo Complex. Sealed pallets moved from armored trucks into climate-controlled vault rooms, logged against airway bills, then flown out on morning departures. Talbot's route brought him past those doors at predictable times. He heard the hydraulic hiss when the locks engaged. He never asked questions. He wrote notes. Folded slips in his wallet listed codes and door labels. V3 Mag, E19, N maint. On February 2, 2017, he requested a badge access expansion to include waste staging for deep clean. A scheduler approved it. The change let him move through a corridor behind Vault 3 without calling a supervisor. Life outside work left few marks. Receipts show groceries on Old National Highway, work boots from a surplus outlet, prepaid cell refills in cash. In January 2018, he withdrew $200 and bought tools at a discount chain, a voltage tester, insulated gloves, a tool roll. He purchased 3 used rolling bins at a salvage auction. He kept them in a rented 5x10 storage unit on Camp Creek Parkway under the name OT Holdings. There was no sudden debt. What investigators later documented instead was pattern. A man inside a system long enough to learn its rhythms, then to notice its pauses. He mapped underfloor routes used by electricians. He timed the guard rounds on the cargo mezzanine, 17 minutes, with a 1-minute gap at the top of the hour. He noted that during nightly generator tests, old doors in Bay 17 clicked twice before sealing. On November 9, 2017, a localized outage darkened Bay 12 for 90 seconds after a breaker trip. Reports show cameras rebooted first, alarms second, and legacy magnetic locks last. Talbot was mopping nearby. He watched a dock agent prop a failing door while maintenance reset the panel. No breach was recorded. By December, Talbot adjusted his cleaning loop to place him beside Bay 17 between 0240 and 0255, when staffing was thinnest and audits least frequent. He set phone alarms to silent vibrations keyed to patrol times. He began carrying a manifest sleeve in his cart with a blank label that read, "Return material, not for manifest." On paper, he remained invisible. In practice, he was rehearsing. On March 8, 2018, 4 days before the blackout, Talbot clocked in at 2156, finished Concourse T early, then spent 15 minutes off route in the service core behind Bay 17. The system logged 2 badge swipes, 0010 and 0029, door E19. No supervisor flagged the pings. No camera view was saved beyond 30 days. What he did inside those 15 minutes is unknown. What happened 4 nights later is not. The weakness revealed itself by accident. On September 17, 2017, at 3:11 a.m., a power surge tripped a transformer near Cargo Bay. 12. For 92 seconds, lights dimmed, alarms froze, and every magnetic lock on that line defaulted to fail-open mode. Technicians rushed to reset the system, but to Owen Talbot, mopping nearby, it was more than a technical glitch. It was proof that the security chain had an order, and when that order broke, everything opened before it locked. From that night on, he started watching every anomaly. Whenever electricians worked on panels, he timed how long doors stayed unlatched. Whenever generators kicked in, he noted which cameras came online first. Over weeks, a pattern emerged. Cameras returned in just under 50 seconds. Alarms followed at around 65. But the old mechanical magnetic locks used on several cargo vaults took just over 2 minutes to re-engage. That was the window, a brief, predictable gap when doors designed to protect millions of dollars would stand open if the power dropped just right. Through the fall and winter of 2017, Talbot tested the system in small, careful ways. On December 6th, he flipped a non-critical lighting switch in a service corridor and watched a sensor reboot mid-round, unnoticed by guards. On January 14, 2018, he pushed an empty waste container, one he had modified with hidden false bottom panels, into a restricted hallway marked "Authorized Staff Only." No one stopped him. The container sat outside Vault 3 for 3 hours before a loader moved it. No one checked inside. On February 3rd, he went further, leaving a dummy crate labeled "Return, not for manifest" on a pallet rail. It remained untouched for 3 days. The lesson was clear. If something looked official, no one questioned it. He also studied the human element. Patrol routes were predictable. 17-minute rotations with a 1-minute gap. Until February, when a supervisor named Carl Montrose shortened the handover window to 38 seconds. Talbot adjusted, tailing patrols and cleaning only in zones they had just cleared. After 2 weeks, he had rebuilt a new patrol map accurate to the second. Bit by bit, the outline of a plan took shape in his notebooks. He would trigger a power drop in Cargo Bay 17 with a disguise breaker tool hidden inside a janitor's cart, exploit the 2-minute unlock gap to move a sealed cash pallet into a crate disguised as refuse, and exit through service hatch E19, which bypassed biometric checks during emergencies. The crate would be loaded onto a cleaning truck cleared for waste removal, leaving the airport under a routine manifest. One line in a maintenance binder mentioned that Bay 17 shared a generator circuit with Bay 15, a section built in the 1980s. Talbot highlighted the note and dismissed it as irrelevant. Later, investigators would mark that same note as the detail that changed everything. By March 1st, 2018, Talbot knew every sensor, every lock, every dead angle. A janitor with no authority now understood the heartbeat of the airport better than the engineers who built it. All he needed were the tools and the people to turn the flaw into a plan. That step began 9 days before the blackout. It began with 3 people and a series of meetings no one noticed. 9 days before the blackout, Owen Talbot started leaving the airport after his shift and walking 3 blocks to a Waffle House off Old National Highway. He always chose the same booth in the back, near the kitchen doors. At first, he sat alone, writing in a cheap spiral notebook. Then others began to join him. One was Naomi Fletcher, 38, a former freight clerk who had been dismissed in 2015 for falsifying shipment record. The other was Silas McKinney, 46, a contractor electrician who had once rewired part of Hartsfield's cargo grid. All 3 blended into the background of the night crowd. a janitor, a clerk, an out-of-work tradesman. But together they were designing a plan that would exploit one of the most secure transport hubs in the world. Fletcher's role was paper. She still had contacts in freight brokerage and knew the language of manifests, the dense forms that followed every shipment in and out of the cargo bays. Her task was to create a false removal order, a routine return material, cleaning waste manifest, scheduled for the early hours of March 12th. If it looked right, it would enter the system as just another empty container clearance, flagged for disposal after hours. McKinney's job was the power. He still owned parts from a portable breaker rig, an emergency override unit designed to test circuit loads, and he modified it to fit inside the hollow frame of a janitor's floor buffer. A hidden switch on the handle would trip the local grid in Cargo Bay 17 without raising alarms elsewhere. Talbot's part was everything else: timing, routes, exits, and above all, invisibility. They rehearsed each detail like clockwork. On March 3rd at 02:48 a.m., Talbot followed a guards patrol through Bay 17 with a stopwatch hidden in his pocket. He recorded every turn, every pause, every glance at the monitor panel. The pattern matched what he had mapped. 17 minutes between sweeps, with a 1-minute handover when the corridor was empty. That was the window. On March 5th, McKinney joined Talbot during the shift change, posing as a contractor reviewing a flickering panel. Together, they timed how long the old magnetic locks took to re-engage after a minor power dip. The result, 2 minutes and 11 seconds before the system sealed. But even the best-laid plans cracked under reality. The first near failure came on March 6th when Fletcher's test manifest, a dummy return order for a non-existent waste crate, was flagged by a freight clerk who noticed an unfamiliar disposal code. Fletcher acted fast, deleting the entry before escalation and claiming it was a training test. The file vanished from the system, but so did her confidence. They rewrote the manifest using authentic phrasing from archived orders, copying internal shorthand that only staff would recognize. The second near failure came 2 nights later. McKinney tested the modified breaker rig in an empty maintenance corridor. The surge lasted longer than expected, and a motion sensor camera rebooted mid-cycle, triggering a silent diagnostic alert. Security dispatched a technician to inspect the line at 04:12 a.m. Talbot happened to be on shift and overheard the call. They dismantled the rig and moved it to a new hiding spot hours before the inspection team arrived. The report filed the next morning concluded the fault was environmental. By March 8th, the pieces were falling into place. Talbot had memorized a 24-step sequence for the operation, each step paired with a timestamp. At 02:46, the breaker rig would trigger the localized outage. By 02:48, Vault 3's locks would default to mechanical override. By 02:50, the $18 million pallet would be broken into 3 smaller loads and sealed inside a disguised waste container. At 02:52, Talbot would swipe through service hatch E19, bypassing biometric checks under emergency mode. At 03:03, the container would be loaded onto a cleaning truck registered for overnight waste removal. At 03:24, the truck would exit through Gate 7 with a standard clearance code. Every minute was accounted for. There was still one problem: the backup power system. On March 9th, while reviewing maintenance logs Fletcher had acquired, Talbot noticed an annotation that made him pause. Cargo Bay 17 shared a generator line with Bay 15, an older section rewired decades earlier. He highlighted it but pushed the thought aside. The load test suggested the generator would not engage during a localized trip. It seemed irrelevant, and time was running out. The final rehearsal happened on March 10th. Talbot walked the full route in uniform, pushing an empty janitor's cart. McKinney followed 20 meters behind with a voltmeter disguised as a clipboard, checking panel access points. Fletcher texted them simulated manifest updates from a burner phone. At 02:52, Talbot swiped into service hatch E19, a dry run of the crucial moment. No alarms, no questions. Cameras showed nothing unusual. The test ended in silence. The third near failure came that same night. A new night shift supervisor, Elena Ruiz, decided to conduct unscheduled patrols after a training seminar on insider threats. At 02:55, 3 minutes after Talbot's rehearsal ended, Ruiz appeared in Corridor C, a zone normally unpatrolled at that hour. Had the test run lasted just 5 minutes longer, she might have walked directly into it. Talbot noted her route and shifted the planned timeline forward by 6 minutes. By March 11th, the plan was final. Fletcher purchased 2 prepaid phones and set one to auto-delete messages every 12 hours. McKinney secured 2 false contractor badges dated February 2016, discarded during an old renovation. Talbot rented a self-storage locker under a false name near Forest Park MARTA station, where they stashed a decoy waste container to swap after the operation. If something went wrong, it would buy them precious minutes before anyone realized the real container was missing. The hours before the blackout passed quietly. Talbot worked his normal Sunday shift, cleaned concourse tea, ate a sandwich from a vending machine, and clocked out at 23:58. Security logs show nothing unusual. Cameras catch him walking down a service tunnel alone, pushing a gray janitor's cart. There is no audio. No one remembers seeing him after 02:30 a.m. What investigators later concluded was that by that moment, the 3 had rehearsed the plan enough times that they no longer spoke during execution. Every movement was muscle memory, every second already decided. Somewhere beneath the terminal, a janitor, an ex-electrician, and a disgraced freight clerk were about to attempt one of the most audacious airport thefts in U.S. history. Everything, every note, every rehearsal, every second of planning pointed toward a 2-minute window and a single mechanical flaw no one but Owen Talbot had ever noticed. In the early hours of March 12th, he would test whether the machine he had spent a decade cleaning could also be the one he escaped through. The rain came in thin needles that made the aprons shine like oiled steel. Ground crews closed 2 stands and drifted back to shelter. In the service corps, fluorescent buzz flattened every sound. A gray janitor's cart rolled past locked cages, past warning placards, and a line of utility doors that most employees never noticed. The buffer on top was ordinary. The power assembly hidden inside it was not. Owen Talbot kept his badge cupped in his palm and walked with the slow, bored pace of a man no camera ever watches for long. 2:45 a.m. Routine on paper. Talbot's scan sheet ticked off Concourse T, Tunnel 4, the North Cargo Corps. He signed the line the same way he always did, compressed initials that looked like a scuff mark, then steered toward Bay 17. He paused at the red stripe, waited for a patrol to pass, and counted the steps after their radios faded. Somewhere outside the fence, a rental sedan idled with its lights off. Inside, Naomi Fletcher stared at a burner phone and a handwritten timeline. The false removal order she had prepared, RME-19, sat in the freight system's queue like lint in a filter. A few miles away, under a borrowed contractor jacket, Silas McKinney walked through a side gate with a tool case that was mostly air and the calm of a man who never looked like an event. Talbot's cart squeaked once on a floor seam. He lifted the caster and eased it down gently. He had rehearsed the route until each gesture felt like muscle memory. The half turn at the fire riser, the shoulder nudge to coax the service hatch, the fake pause to wipe a non-existent spill if anyone rounded a corner. When he pushed through the last bend toward Vault 3, the corridor looked like it always did. Empty, humming, unimportant. The bin under the buffer looked the same too. Scratched, barcoded, scuffed white, where it had kissed dock rails 100 times. Its base was a deception built from aluminum tubing and patience. McKinney reached a side panel by Bay 17 and tilted his head the way electricians do when they want to look harmless. He snapped a cover down, plugged in a dummy meter, and palmed the small screw he had loosened earlier so it would seem like he had fixed something. His watch ticked loudly in his own ears. In the sedan, Fletcher sent the first nudge to the help desk inbox with the exact shorthand freight staff used to nag each other. It would land, wait, and age into routine. Talbot rolled the cart against the panel line and rested his thumb under a strip of black tape where a floor buffer switch should have been. He knew where the cameras were and where one had been blind for years. He also knew the system around him was a ladder of dependencies. Cameras first, alarms second, legacy locks last. If the power died in the right place, order would break the wrong way. 2:46 a.m. Power cut. A tight click, more felt than heard. The corridor's light fell 2 shades, emergency strips breathed on, and Bay 17 slipped into the kind of darkness airports call safe. What looked like a maintenance flutter to everyone else was a planned fracture for Talbot. He pushed for the vault before the hum changed back. The proximity sensor blinked once and went still. The manual lever behind the recess was cold. He pulled. The seal released with a rubbered sigh that would never show on any camera mic because no one records sound in that hallway. Inside, the vault was still. Emergency light glazed the racks. Small bags on one shelf, sealed boxes on another. On the far pallet, shrink-wrapped bricks of U.S. currency, banded in straps and tagged with airway numbers for a Zurich-bound courier leg. $18 million looked like order. Neat weights and plastic sheen. Not like anything that could vanish into a janitor's cart. Talbot slid the lid of the bin and peeled back the black liners. He cut 2 straps and levered the first third of the pallet into the hollow. The weight went down with a thick, soft thud. He pressed the stack with his forearm to flatten the plastic, rotated the second third, and walked it in by the edges. The third followed with a grunt. Close enough. He pulled the liner back over the load, hooked the lid, and felt the latches bite. The container sagged a millimeter and then held. His hands shook, but his steps didn't. Down the corridor, McKinney counted the kind of seconds men count when they have built their own margin of error. Cameras on this circuit would be coming back any moment. He unplugged the dummy meter, reseated the cover, and let his shoulders settle as if a small problem had been solved. He walked away at the boring speed of honest work. In the help desk queue, the false removal order rolled to the next line item, which no one would open until after 3. A dome camera woke early on a linked circuit, a quirk Talbot had noted in a yellowed binder and then dismissed. Its iris opened and took a single usable frame, a gray sleeve, the edge of a dark lid, a glint of a handle. The angle was wrong and the light was low. Nobody saw it live. Later, an analyst would freeze the smear and draw a red circle around the shape of a bin wheel, as if certainty could be sketched in the dark. Talbot pulled the vault door back to its seat and felt the magnet coil whisper alive inside the jam. He moved. The bin rattled once at an expansion joint. He leaned a hip into the side to stop the noise. At the junction, he turned left, past a utility closet he had already unlocked with a copy key, and reached service hatch E19. The badge reader stared at him with a dark LED. In emergency mode, the hatch ignored biometrics for egress. He slid his badge, felt for the soft, mechanical click, and shouldered the door open. The hinge complained. He quieted it with his palm against the metal. He did not look back. The stairwell down to the utility tunnel pitched gently enough to roll, but a load like this complained at every seam. Talbot walked with his feet wide and his knees bent, hand over hand on the handle, controlling descent one shallow drop at a time. The air smelled like old coolant and dust. Rain ticked faintly on sheet metal somewhere above. In that underworld of pipes and cable trays, the airport's clean public face ended, and its working gut began. There were no cameras here. There never had been a reason to watch a corridor built for valves and power feeds. Boots struck metal at the far end. 2 firefighters in training vests crossed toward a hydrant, laughing at something on a phone. Talbot froze in a pose any worker understands. A man dealing with a jam, 1 foot braced against a wheel, 1 hand on the lid, his face down to the concrete in a way that says, "I was told to do this, and I will do it." The pair passed within 20 paces, nodded without seeing him, and swung through a door that hissed shut. Silence returned as a physical thing. Above, as systems recovered, the shared generator on Bay 15 pushed a surge across a coupling that shouldn't have been coupled. Somewhere up there, a corridor camera came back alive a half-beat earlier than expected and caught a sliver of motion that an investigator would later call consistent with the passage of a rolling container. Down here, it remained dim and private. Talbot nudged the bin forward, followed the blue-painted valve with a 1998 stencil, and steered toward the access where the loop road came closest to the service core. A white cleaning truck idled behind a roll-up door with an orange beacon that flickered instead of spinning. The subcontractor logo on the door had bled into the paint. The driver kept both hands on the wheel and his eyes straight ahead. He had been told the load would smell and to expect extra bags on top. He had been told to wait until he heard 4 knocks in a pattern, 2 and 2. He had been told there would be $40,000 where he could find it if he said nothing to anyone a week later. He had signed nothing, because this job did not issue paper. Talbot raised the roll-up in stages. Rain curtained the opening. He tapped the truck's side panel. 2 knocks, a breath, 2 more. The driver's head moved a fraction. The bin came up wheel by wheel, using the lip as a fulcrum, the kind of lift that makes the world narrow to breath and leverage. Talbot strapped it to the bed and threw 3 heavy black contractor bags on top. Real waste, soaked and heavy, the smell loudly, convincingly true. He dropped the door, flicked the latch to manual, and walked around to the passenger side. He didn't climb in. He did nothing anyone later could claim looked like riding in a truck that would leave with money. He set the mop back into the buffer, coiled the dummy cord, wiped rain off the taped switch, and pushed the cart toward a janitor closet 2 bays away, the one he had opened earlier for exactly this moment. The airport resumed its hum in small pieces. Patrols flipped. A supervisor radioed a reminder about a training module nobody wanted to complete. The help desk inbox aged the RME-19 note into a green-lighted task that felt like permission to no one in particular. Systems finished rebooting, and emergencies became paperwork. TOS, 50 a.m. Transfer window. In the official post-incident diagrams, an analyst would draw this span as a block. Locks unpowered, doors in manual, surveillance recovering on staggered rails, and a man with a cart somewhere that overruns couldn't see. In reality, it felt like air before a storm. Quiet, charged, and already gone by the time anyone understands its shape. Talbot pressed 2 fingers into the bin's lid and felt the vibration of his own pulse. Then he walked toward the personnel door that would spit him out on the loop road, the cart behind him performing the cover story of his own alibi. Rain came in sideways. He kept his head down and his hood up and pushed past the truck without looking at it, the way people ignore things they shouldn't notice. In the cab, the driver checked his clipboard and the gate badge clipped to the visor. The line at the top blurred with damp. Waste, RME-19 0330. A smear of official language that had always cleared this lane. The engine trembled at idle and then settled. He watched the puddles fatten in the headlights and waited for the minute he had been told to wait for. Talbot slid the cart into the closet he had chosen for this. A small concrete cell where spare mops leaned like rifles, and a forgotten yellow wet floor sign sat folded like a broken hinge. He locked the door with the copy key, slipped the key under the door with the toe of his boot so it would belong to no one later, and turned his back on the buffer with the dead rig inside. He did not look at his hands. He did not look at the door he had used. He walked like men walk when they have a reason to be somewhere else. On the apron, the orange beacon flickered its sickly loop. The driver breathed with the rhythm of his own foot on the brake. Fletcher, in the sedan at the fence line, killed the dome light and set her phone to airplane mode. Everything that mattered now belonged to other systems. A log line at a gatehouse, a barcode against a scratched reader plate, the mood of a guard whose coffee might still be hot. 3303 M. Truck departure. The parking brake released with a small thump that sounded too loud inside the cab. The truck rolled forward, slow at first to angle away from a pothole that hit a deeper hole underwater. The route felt longer at 4 miles an hour than it would have felt at 40. The first checkpoint took the plate and flashed the cheap chirp that means good enough. A guard in a poncho raised a thermos in acknowledgement. The driver raised 2 fingers from the wheel without shifting his eyes from the lane. The cameras recorded what cameras record: an approach, a bar, a pass, and the last 6 feet of a truck bed with black bags slumped under rain. A security SUV nosed out from a service lane with its headlights off, swung them on, and tucked behind the truck for a stretch that felt like a mile and measured as yards. The driver's shoulders climbed toward his ears. The SUV peeled away toward a stuck badge call at a pedestrian gate. Its dash camera caught the subcontractor name without the phone number. The rain polished the mistake into anonymity. In the service core, E19 finished its reset. The LED returned to steady red. A vacuum sat where a bin should have been. 2 floors up, a janitorial supervisor would later wonder why a container had migrated without a ticket. Then shrug. People move things all the time when rooms needed cleaning. Bay 17 returned to its default brightness. A loader checked a clipboard, found nothing to load, and checked the same clipboard again. The truck crossed a patch of concrete that always shuddered under weight. The bin slid an inch and stopped against its strap. The 3 black bags sloughed toward the rail and held. If anyone had cut them open on that road at that speed, they would have found nothing but sodden towels, mop heads, and a smell that would suggest the driver had told the truth. The truth under the false floor would still have been there, arranged in bands, silent as brick. Gate 7 sat crooked where a bumper had nudged the post 2 years before. The reader lived in a box that could have used paint. A puddle drowned the rut in front of the pedestal. The guard inside the hut watched 4 squares of video flicker in and out of perfect sync. He yawned and flexed his fingers, because the heat made the small room feel smaller. The job at this hour was more reflex than choice. Scan, beep, rise, pass, drop, log. The truck pulled up short and let its brake breathe. The driver peeled the barcode badge off the visor and wiped it with his wrist. A curtain of water ran off the edge of the roof onto his sleeve when he leaned out. He tilted the card toward the reader and waited for the small happiness of a sound. It didn't come. He drew it back, wiped again, adjusted his angle the way a man adjusts to a machine that never loved him. The first flash on the reader was red, the shrug that means, try again. He counted to 3 because a man looks less desperate when he counts. The guard looked up at the sound of his own boredom and then backed down because nothing in the frame asked for more attention than a small rectangle held by a wet hand. The second pass sparked the right note. The barrier arm hesitated like something waking up and then climbed high on its waterlogged hinge. The driver loosened his shoulders and did not move for 2 beats because experience had taught him that machines sometimes take the gift back. He released the brake, kept the speed at a crawl, and let the truck slide under the arm with all the reverence of a cathedral door. 3:16 a.m. Exit, Gate 7. The front bumper crossed the paint where airport property ends and public road begins. The guard watched the taillights slur into rain and tapped a key to commit the log line into a database no one would think to check until hours later. The barrier fell behind the truck like a curtain. In the wide shot, the vehicle dissolved into weather. In the close shot, the barcode badge returned to its visor clip as nothing more than a wet rectangle. Inside the bin, beneath the noise and the odor and the plastic, sat money that a cargo auditor would soon look for and not find. The cameras finished their catches up, timestamps aligned with the present again, and everything the airport could measure resumed its normal rhythm. On the other side of the fence, the road curved left, then right, then out toward a patchwork of lights that meant residential streets and warehouses and exits, choices braided together like cables in the tunnel Talbot had just left. Behind him, in a locked closet, a scuffed buffer waited for someone else to wonder why the power cord felt different, and the battery felt heavy and the label didn't quite match the others. Above him, a vault gleamed at a temperature chosen for paper. Around him, an institution reassured itself that procedures had worked because nothing had burned down and no one had shouted. The only thing that had changed was location. The truck's tires sent up low sheets of water and then were gone beyond the camera's last useful pixel. The gatehouse monitor returned to its 4-square hum. The guard lifted his thermos, and the log line wrote itself into the ledger of small hours as if it were the most ordinary sentence in the world. Exit, clean southwest, Gate 7. The truck's taillights disappear into the weather on Sullivan Road. The security camera timestamps catch up by half a second. The log updates. The monitor goes back to 4 squares and a soft fan hum. The money is no longer on airport property. By the time the morning cargo audit began, the pallet count inside Vault 3 was short by 1. A pallet containing $18 million in sealed currency bundles, scheduled for a Zurich-bound courier flight, had vanished. The discovery triggered an immediate Level 3 discrepancy alert, and the airport police secured Cargo Bay 17 within minutes. By mid-morning, the FBI's Atlanta field office had taken over the investigation. The case was registered as FBI file, later known internally as Ghost Janitor. Investigators started with access logs. The swipe data from service hatch E19 showed a single janitorial badge used during the blackout. Talbot, O. No other cleaning personnel were assigned to that area overnight. Surveillance review revealed more. One camera, which had rebooted earlier than expected, captured a blurred frame of a figure pushing a large container away from Vault 3 during the outage. The image was indistinct, but the gray uniform and motion pattern matched Talbot's route. Another camera, at a different angle, briefly showed the same container entering a maintenance tunnel. None of the footage displayed faces or clear identifying features. From that point on, the trail went cold. Talbot's locker at Monarch Facility Services was empty except for a paperback novel and a single worn uniform shirt. His phone was found smashed in a waste bin near the staff entrance. His car, a 2006 Chevrolet sedan, was discovered abandoned in a parking lot near the Forest Park MARTA station. Inside were cleaning supplies, a flashlight, and nothing else. His apartment lease was paid through the end of the month. Groceries remained in the refrigerator. His toothbrush was still wet. There was no passport, no credit cards, and no sign of hurried departure. The truck used in the operation was traced to Clean South Waste, a subcontractor with an active airport contract. The assigned driver, a 39-year-old temporary worker, failed to report for his next shift. 2 days later, the truck was located burned out in a wooded area of Clayton County, its cargo bed empty. The waste manifest Fletcher had inserted into the system was still present in the records, listed as completed at 0330. But no disposal logs were ever filed by the receiving facility. Investigators built a profile of the operation piece by piece. A forged removal manifest was linked to a public Wi-Fi IP address registered to a cafe near Old National Highway. Surveillance cameras showed Naomi Fletcher entering that cafe multiple times in the week before the theft. She was arrested in April 2018 and later sentenced to 11 years in federal prison on charges of conspiracy and interference with interstate commerce. Silas McKinney was named as a person of interest but never charged. He crossed the Mexican border 4 days after the heist and has not been located since. Analysis of the airport's electrical system revealed the critical flaw Talbot had exploited. A shared generator circuit between cargo bays 15 and 17 had caused one surveillance camera to reboot earlier than expected, capturing a blurred image investigators believed to be Talbot. The same report documented how fail-open locks reverted to manual override during localized power loss, creating the 2-minute window Talbot had relied on. Following the incident, airport security protocols were overhauled nationwide. Emergency lock systems were redesigned, generator circuits were isolated, and all cargo area cameras were fitted with battery backups to eliminate reboot gaps. Despite the changes, the central mystery remained unsolved. Owen Talbot was never found. The FBI received more than 60 tips over the next 5 years, including reported sightings in Belize, Panama, Croatia, and northern Mexico. None were verified. Financial intelligence units tracked several suspicious wire transfers totaling $2.1 million through shell companies in the Caribbean, but investigators could not directly link them to Talbot or the stolen funds. The $18 million have never been recovered. The official FBI case summary describes Talbot as a janitorial contractor with extensive unauthorized knowledge of secure cargo infrastructure, and concludes that the theft was executed with a level of planning and operational discipline consistent with professional logistics operations. The final page of the report, dated March 2023, lists the case status as open fugitive at large. Today, the file known as Ghost Janitor remains one of the most significant unresolved theft investigations in U.S. aviation history. A man who spent a decade cleaning floors walked into a blackout and walked out with a fortune. He left behind no footprints, no messages, and no trace, only an empty pallet, a burned truck, and questions investigators are still trying to answer.